story begins with a woman named Louise Banks welcoming her newborn daughter into the world. As time passes, she experiences the joys and challenges of motherhood, playing games, sharing bedtime stories, and watching her grow. But as the years pass, their closeness fades. One moment she's loving and playful, the next distant and defiant, but their time together is painfully short. Her daughter is diagnosed with a rare, incurable disease, and despite all efforts, she loses her battle at a young age. Louise is left heartbroken, her world forever changed, the weight of loss never fading. Then, the world changed. It all started the day they arrived. Louise, a linguistics professor, walks into her university, noticing an unusual tension in the air. The halls are filled with murmurs, students huddled around television screens. She steps into her lecture hall, but her students are distracted, eyes glued to their phones. Moments later, one of them speaks up, asking her to turn on the news. On-screen breaking news reports flash. A massive, unidentified spacecraft has landed in Montana. 12 in total have appeared across the world, each stationed in a different country. Alarms blare throughout the university, and soon classes are suspended indefinitely. As Louise arrives home, she turns on the news. The screen is filled with frantic reports. Fighter jets scream across the sky, people rush to stores in panic, and the military takes control of the streets. Governments scramble to assess the situation, but no one knows why the aliens are here. The next day, Louise returns to her office, the campus nearly deserted. She sits alone, watching the news unfold. The global uncertainty is growing. Some see the arrival as an opportunity, while others fear it signals an invasion. Then, an unexpected visit. Colonel Weber from Army Intelligence steps in, carrying an urgent mission. Louise has worked with them before, assisting in translations, and now they need her expertise again. He plays a recording, strange, low growls and echoes, a sound unlike anything human. It is the first ever communication with the aliens. Her expertise in linguistics is needed to decipher the message. However, translating an entirely unknown language without context is impossible. Language isn't just words, it's observation, interaction, and understanding intent. She insists that direct interaction with the source is the only way to make progress. Weber is reluctant. He warns her that if she doesn't take the assignment, they will approach another linguist. But Louise understands that translation is more than just literal words. It's about meaning. To prove this, she suggests a test, telling him to ask their next choice for the true meaning of the Sanskrit word for war, before making a final decision. That night, as news reports fuel speculation and panic spreads across the globe, Louise drifts asleep in front of the television. In the middle of the night, the sound of approaching helicopters jolts her awake. Weber has returned, this time with orders. Louise has been selected for the mission. The test proved Louise's superior grasp of language, while others gave a direct translation of war as an argument or conflict. She provided its deeper cultural meaning, a desire for more cows. This understanding confirmed she was the right choice. Within minutes, she is airborne, leaving behind the life she knew, heading toward the greatest mystery humanity has ever encountered. Inside, Louise meets Ian Donnelly, a theoretical physicist assigned to work with her. During their introduction, Ian references her work on linguistics and argues that science, not language, is the foundation of civilization. Louise counters his perspective, pointing out that true understanding begins with communication, not equations. As the helicopter approaches Montana, Louise looks out and sees the massive spacecraft standing vertically in an open field. It looms over the landscape, silent and mysterious. Upon landing at the military camp, she and Ian go through strict protocols. Their phones are confiscated and they are issued security IDs. A medical officer administers an immunization shot before they proceed to the main control center, where communication with the other 11 landing sites is being monitored. Inside, Louise meets Agent Halpern from the CIA, who warns her that no real progress has been made in deciphering the alien communication. China has already taken a more aggressive stance. Meanwhile, a scientist briefs them on the ship's atmosphere. Air circulation inside is stable, but they will only have 2 hours before oxygen levels become a concern. Later, Weber takes Louise and Ian to their teams, explaining the mission's priorities. The main goal is clear: find out why the aliens are here. Soon after, they suit up in hazmat gear and prepare to enter the ship. As the convoy approaches, Louise feels a wave of nausea, while Ian is filled with excitement. The sheer scale of the spacecraft is overwhelming. Every 18 hours, an opening appears at the bottom of the pod, allowing entry. The team ascends through a lift system, and as they cross the threshold, gravity shifts, pulling them sideways. Their bodies struggle to adjust, floating momentarily before stabilizing. Inside, the air is thick with mist and a glowing screen stands at the far end of the chamber. A caged bird is placed on the ground. If the bird remains unharmed, it confirms that oxygen levels are safe. Suddenly, two massive creatures emerge from the mist. Towering cephalopod-like beings with 7 limbs, they move with a slow, deliberate grace. The team names them Heptapods. Strange, deep sounds echo from behind the screen, but there is no immediate way to interpret them. Louise hesitates, overwhelmed by their presence, while Ian watches in awe. Weber expects results, but there is no clear way to proceed. Back at the base, Weber is impatient. He gives Louise only a few hours to come up with a strategy before they go back in. Ian, still shaken, vomits in the background. Outside, news reports show the world descending into further panic. Riots, mass hysteria, and even doomsday cults emerging in response to the alien arrival. The next day, Louise has an idea. Instead of relying on sound, she decides to try written communication. She brings a whiteboard with her, believing that even if spoken language is incomprehensible, the heptapods might recognize symbols. Inside the pod, she writes the word human and holds it up to the screen. The heptapods pause, then extend a limb and respond. A circular symbol appears, ink-like strokes forming a complex shape. More symbols follow, intricate and layered. This is their written language. Back at the camp, Weber doubts if this approach will work. Louise explains that without a proper foundation, miscommunication could lead to disaster. She shares an example. When Captain Cook arrived in Australia, he asked the Aboriginal people about a strange animal. They said, kangaroo, but later it was discovered that the word actually meant, I don't understand. A mistake like this could have serious consequences. Weber remains skeptical but allows Louise to continue. He instructs her to develop a vocabulary list before the next session. After Weber leaves, Ian remarks that the story isn't true, but Louise points out that it still proves her point about the dangers of miscommunication. Meanwhile, tensions are rising. China has adopted an entirely different approach, demanding answers from the aliens through forceful tactics. The global situation is becoming more unstable. Louise, however, stays focused on the mission. She explains to Weber that before they can ask the heptapods why they're here, they must first teach them the basics of human language. Without this, there is no way to understand their answer. The alarm goes off, and Weber reminds Louise to stick to her vocabulary list. Back inside the pod, she writes her name, and the heptapods respond with a similar but slightly altered symbol. She senses hesitation from them, so she makes a bold decision. She removes her hazmat suit. The team panics, but she insists they need to see her. She steps forward and places her palm against the glass. One of the heptapods mirrors her action, responding with a new symbol. Louise believes this is progress, and Ian follows her lead, removing his suit and introducing himself. In response, the heptapods give them 2 more symbols. Louise suspects they are their names. Ian decides to nickname them Abbott and Costello. As they return to the base, Louise suddenly feels unwell and is struck by a strange yet familiar vision of a child. Concerned, the doctor warns her about contamination risks, but Weber allows the sessions to continue, seeing the progress being made. Meanwhile, tensions rise among the soldiers. Some fear the unknown threat they might be facing. Over the next several weeks, Louise and Ian work tirelessly to decipher the language. Despite constant analysis, the heptapods leave no detectable traces, no waste, sound, or radiation. If they communicate between ships, it remains undetectable. The reason behind their chosen landing sites is still unknown. One of Louise's breakthroughs comes when she realizes that what the heptapods say and what they write have no direct correlation. Their writing is purely visual, free of time, with no clear forward or backward direction. Linguists refer to this as non-linear orthography, suggesting that the heptapods may perceive time differently. Progress is slow. It takes Louise nearly a month to form a proper response to a simple phrase. Asking the complex question of why they came will take much longer. Meanwhile, the world is spiraling into chaos. Riots and violent protests break out, fueled by leaked images of the aliens. Some nations begin to distrust the heptapods, while conspiracy theories spread online. At the military base, some soldiers fear waiting too long and discuss making the first move. One night, while working on translations, Louise has another vision of the child. This time, the girl is showing her a book about planets and drawings she made for school. The memory shifts, and Louise recalls discussing her divorce. The visions feel real, yet unfamiliar. Ian notices her unease and asks if she's okay, but she struggles to explain what's happening. Later, Weber checks in asking when she last saw the doctor. Louise steps outside, overwhelmed as memories, past, present, or future, seem to blur together. That evening, she and Ian talk about language and thought. Ian explains a theory, the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which suggests that fully immersing in a new language can rewire the brain's perception of reality. He casually asks if she has started dreaming in the heptapod language. Louise looks up, and in her room she sees a heptapod standing before her. Louise wakes up in her bed, briefly relieved, thinking it was all a dream. But reality sets in when Weber arrives, leading her to the control room for a translation. The military has intercepted a phone conversation between China's General Shang and his team. Through the live feed, Louise translates his words. Each of the 12 ships is offering advanced technology, and their scientists are trying to decode specific segments of the message, referred to as sets, though their exact meaning remains unclear. Weber informs her that both China and Russia are mobilizing their forces. Their interpretation of the aliens' message has turned into a global crisis. With tensions rising, Weber tells Louise that it's time to ask the big question. Back inside the ship, Louise carefully constructs her logogram, posing the question, what is their purpose? The heptapods respond with a phrase that translates to offer weapon. At the base, the atmosphere turns tense. Weber and Agent Halpern argue over the meaning of the phrase, fearing it signals a threat. Louise and Ian, however, insist that the heptapods may not distinguish between weapon and tool the same way humans do. Ian adds that the message could mean they are offering a weapon or asking for one as part of a trade. The only way to be sure is to ask them again. But tensions are already escalating. China and Russia cut off communication with the other sites, fearing the worst. Agent Halpern suggests that the aliens are manipulating humanity into turning against each other, just as history has shown in times of conflict. As fear spreads, a group of rogue soldiers convinced the heptapods pose a threat, quietly place explosives inside the ship. Meanwhile, Louise and Ian, unaware of the bomb, return for another session. Inside, they press the heptapods for clarification, but before they can get a full response, Abbott begins tapping on the glass, urgently trying to communicate. Louise senses that it wants her to write alongside them. She places her palms on the glass, and suddenly visions of the child flood her mind again. Abbott continues writing, revealing a massive set of new symbols. Outside, security forces close in on the rogue soldiers, but it's too late. The timer on the bomb nears 0. Costello retreats while Abbott remains, continuing the message. At the last moment, Abbott slams against the barrier, creating a shockwave that hurls Louise and Ian backward. The bomb detonates. Instead of killing them, the explosion pushes them into a sealed chamber within the ship. Abbott's final act had saved them. Moments later, Louise wakes up in the camp's medical bay, disoriented from a concussion. The doctor informs her of the attack, but Ian and the rest of the team are safe. Alarms blare outside. The team rushes to the field and watches in shock as the ship lifts itself higher into the sky, but it doesn't leave. The mission isn't over yet. Meanwhile, international tensions reach a boiling point. General Shang issues an ultimatum. The aliens must leave within 24 hours, or they will face military action. Russia, Pakistan, and Sudan follow China's lead, severing all communication. Back at the base, Ian studies the symbols from their last session. He notices something important. The symbols keep repeating patterns related to time. But then, he realizes something even bigger. The message they received is just a piece of a much larger puzzle. The heptapods didn't give them a full answer. They only shared one part of 12, meaning each ship holds a different piece of the whole message. Louise and Ian present their discovery to the team, explaining that the heptapods' message is just one part of 12. To fully understand it, all 12 countries must work together and share their data. But Halpern disagrees. He reveals that Russia's lead scientist has been killed, his final words being "many become one." Louise believes this phrase connects to what they've just learned. Ian argues that if they share their own findings first, the others might follow. It's not a zero-sum game. True cooperation benefits everyone. As they debate, Louise has a sudden realization. Ian's words spark a memory of her daughter asking about a word she once struggled to recall. The connection feels urgent. Without hesitation, she leaves the meeting. Ian follows her outside, just in time to see something incredible. The ship has sent down a shuttle, hovering just above the ground. Louise steps forward and is taken inside, engulfed in a dense fog. Inside, she finds herself beyond the glass barrier for the first time. Costello approaches, and she immediately asks about Abbott. Costello informs her that Abbott is dying from the injuries caused by the bomb. Louise is overcome with emotion, apologizing on behalf of humanity. She asks them to send a message to the other sites. But instead, Costello tells her, "You already have the weapon. Use it." Confused, she presses for an answer. What is their true purpose? Costello reveals the truth. The heptapods have come to help humanity because, in 3,000 years, they will need humanity's help in return. Louise struggles to understand. How can they know the future? But before she can ask, her mind fills with images. Her daughter, playing in a field, picking up rocks by the creek. Memories that feel real, but that haven't happened yet. She looks at Costello in shock. Her visions were never dreams or flashbacks. They were glimpses of the future. With that final message, Costello disappears into the fog. The ship releases her, lowering her gently to the ground. Ian and Weber rush toward her as she stumbles out, still dazed. But before she can speak, another vision overtakes her. She is standing by a lake with her daughter, now older. The girl asks why her father doesn't look at her the same way anymore. Louise finally understands. She told him something he wasn't ready to hear, that their daughter would one day have an untreatable disease. Back in the present, the world spirals toward war. All 12 ships shift position, and global militaries prepare for conflict. Louise, still disoriented from her experience, walks through the base when another vision strikes her. She sees her future self publishing a book, The Heptapods' Language. She sees herself teaching it, spreading their knowledge, and suddenly she understands. The weapon the heptapods spoke of was never a weapon at all. It was their language, a gift to humanity. Louise explains that once you truly learn the heptapods' language, your perception of time changes. You begin to experience it as they do, non-linearly. But Weber isn't interested. The mission is over. Outside, a vision overtakes her. She sees herself at a future international celebration, standing at a gala. General Shang approaches, telling her that she accomplished something even his superiors couldn't. She changed his mind. He tells her that 18 months ago she called him on his private number. Louise, confused, insists that she doesn't know his number. Shang simply shows it to her and says, "Now you do." Back in the present, it all clicks. She needs to make that call. She runs back into the camp and grabs a satellite phone, quickly dialing the number. Security immediately notices and alerts Halpern. Soldiers rush to track the caller. As she waits for the line to connect, another vision unfolds. In the future, Shang tells her exactly what she said to him, his wife's dying words. In the present, Louise repeats them over the phone as she runs, soldiers closing in. The call goes through. General Shang listens. Ian finds her and shields her from the soldiers just as she finishes the conversation. She lowers the phone, the message complete. Shortly after, an emergency press conference is broadcast worldwide. General Shang announces that China is standing down and will share their data with the other nations. One by one, the other countries follow, uniting to complete the message. As the world watches, the alien ships begin to leave, ascending into the sky. The mission is over. The heptapods have given humanity their gift. But for Louise, this is where her real story begins. She and Ian grow closer, and eventually, they have a daughter, Hannah. Despite knowing her fate, Louise embraces every moment. She chooses to live the life she now remembers. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this. There are amazing stories coming your way. Take care, and see you next time.